Okay, so now we have started a TOM project to write a QAPP for PM10 monitoring. So now after lunch we open up turboQAPP again and we are going to open up that existing project. So we find that project, which I called TOM example, and I open it and it loads all the headers, that most of which are blank, and any information I've entered, and it takes you to the first screen, and it doesn't suggest that you change any of this information, and you can see that this information it considers to be done because this section is in green in the navigation tree on the left. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue to where we were working and show some particularly important screens, which is this one. So this screen asks questions about the method, and this mostly applies to people who are doing criteria pollutant air monitoring measurements, but it has aspects that are important for anybody who's using turboQAPP to complete. So the pollutant, and as an aside, if you are preparing QAPPs for more than one pollutant at a time, they would appear here in this drop-down box. So you could switch back and forth between pollutants at any point in your QAPP. If you want to complete an element for one or the other pollutant, you go back and forth using this drop-down box. We are only working on one, PM10 continuous, so it appears here. And the first panel that asks information is, what are the objectives of this monitoring? And we have the default objectives that appear in EPA guidance material, and that link to guidance material to EPA's AMTIC website is down here. And we also have a pop-up box that talks about, particularly for PM10, since we're monitoring for PM10, it gives this additional link for spatial scales because that's important for PM10. What we're doing in our project is characterizing concentrations for health and welfare. We don't have any significant sources that we're worried about, but we also want to evaluate the impact of air pollution on culturally sensitive areas. And you could also click Other. And again, with any other, if you click Other, it asks you, okay, well, what is it? And I'm going to say, in this case, just as an example, I'm going to say assess impact of open burning. Okay, and now that appears in the list of objectives, and this will be put in as bullet points in your final QAPP. Frequency of monitoring has a suggested text. It's being done to determine attainment with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, so we're conducting monitoring 24 hours a day. If you want to put something else in there, such as whenever we feel like it, you can. You could say accept, and then you could say, oh, I was just kidding. I want the example back. And it'll put it in. So I'm going to say whenever we feel like it, and also 24 hours a day. Say accept. And now this over here on the right is particularly important for any measurements made to compare against the NAAQS, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. You have to use a method that's recognized by EPA as an FRM or an FEM, and all the methods appear here. We try to stay up to date. There may be a few that have been recently added that are not in this list. You could search by name, so you know, we know ours is a and it lists for PM10. Where is it? The TOM series 1400. Or you could, if you know the designation number, you could click that and it puts that checkbox into what you've already checked, or the method code, and these are the AQS codes. So when your data gets formatted and submitted to AQS, which is a whole other exciting topic, your every single hour of data will include this code signifying that it comes from a R&P Teom Series 1400. Or if there is a new instrument that EPA has recognized and it's just been recently added, so we haven't put it into turboQAPP yet, you can add a method here. Scale of representativeness is very important. We are going to say neighborhood. That's a generally safe scale. And so now that we're finished filling in everything on this screen, we can click Next, and now this takes us to something that's more of what we're used to. And I want to show you how to work with tables because that can be a little bit daunting. So I am going to go to element 14, which is my favorite element, quality control. And it shows that there are 3 tabs at the top corresponding to critical criteria, and those are the criteria that must be met by every single hour of data, or that hour should be invalidated. Operational criteria that pertain to, well, there's probably a problem and I need to investigate this and determine whether or not my data are invalid or not. And systematic criteria, which are like data completeness, that pertain to a whole set of data, but perhaps individual hours are valid. One thing to see right away is that it'd be nice to be able to see more of these tables. So you can actually squish the navigation tree over so you can see more of the tables. And we're going to look at critical criteria. So it's hard to see sometimes unless you pull this down, or notice here that there are 4 rows. And you see first that the first criteria is average flow rate, and that's of course the most important thing when making particulate matter measurements. So the criteria, and these correspond to the recommendations in EPA's Red Book documents, and sometimes we have some additional criteria that have been suggested. Let's say we want to edit one of these. Let's say we want to do a 1-point flow check every week instead of every 2 weeks. How would I change that in this table? When you've got the row selected, you can click View Edit, and then it pulls up the fields corresponding to every header. So the requirement is a 1-point flow check, frequency every 2 weeks. I'm just going to change that here to every week. And the criteria are the same. Corrective action is the same. I'm going to say OK. And now, if you go down, you could see that it now appears as every week. If you wanted to add a row in this table, for example, if you wanted to say battery voltage because you knew that you were in an area where there were frequent power outages, you could say weekly for frequency, acceptance criteria in green zone, and information action, see owner's manual page 88, and corrective action, change battery, and say OK. And now that appears, and you can see because we're down here, we've got 5 rows, battery voltage weekly in green zone. That's how you work with tables. You can also delete all of the rows if for some reason you don't want to use this table and you have your own that you want to put in, perhaps after you've exported the QAPP into Word, or if you just want to remove individual rows. So that is working with tables. And you can see this takes us to the operational criteria table. This looks a little bit more complicated, but it just has the table at the top. And then if you have supplementary information which might apply to operational criteria, like things that might be particularly important for your site, you could put those in a paragraph here. If you don't type in anything, then this will just appear as a table on a page without a paragraph at the bottom. This page also has a URL. This links to our ITEP website where we have information about data, all the information about data you could want. And if you have any more, I'd be glad to post it for you. So then if you click next, assuming that you like that table, that takes us to systematic criteria. And again, you can edit any of these by clicking on the View Edit button, and it pulls up each header, requirement, frequency, and so on. And that's working with tables.